This is r slash. No, this isn't r slash. This is actually r slash. I have never been so scared of something in my life. The things that I saw, they weren't supposed to be there. They were wrong. You should not see them. I'm going to tell you about the day I met the black-eyed child. I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. It was spring break and I was spending it with my dad since my mom had to work. He was a police officer. He was off for the week, but he had to do some overtime shifts. So I was by myself most of the time. He would go off to work and then come home late at night, and I was left to fend for myself for the most part, which was fine. We lived in a nice neighborhood. Nothing really ever happened. My dad would just tell me, "Hey, don't open the door for anyone," and I was good to go. It was one of those days where the power was out, so no TV, no internet, just a bunch of candles lit up around the house and a kerosene heater trying to keep the house warm. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book by candlelight, when I heard a knock at the front door. At first I thought it was my dad because he usually knocks when he comes in, but the knocking got louder and more impatient. Knock, 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 knock. I yell out, "Who is it?" Thinking it was my dad, I didn't think anything of it. And being an idiot, I walked over to the door, peered through the peephole and saw a little girl standing there in the dim light of the porch light. She looked to be maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was wearing a long trench coat. All I could see of her face was her hair and her eyes. Her eyes were completely black. I kid you not, like 2 bottomless pits. I started freaking out inside. Who was this kid? Where did she come from? Why was she here? I started to scream for my dad. Then the girl knocked again. As soon as I heard the knock, I ran away from the door, thinking if I hid under my bed she wouldn't find me. I curled up in the fetal position under there, hands over my face, rocking back and forth. I waited what felt like an eternity, hearing every little creak of the house. About an hour went by, and I heard nothing, so I slowly came out from underneath the bed to investigate. I figured if she was really there, she would have already broken down the door by now. But everything was fine. I went to the kitchen to get some water, turned on the radio, sat back down to read my book, trying to calm my nerves. About 30 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. The footsteps came closer and closer until they were right outside the door. Then I heard my doorknob turn. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't make a sound. The door opened slowly, revealing the pitch-black hallway. There was no light in there. I couldn't see anything. I was paralyzed in fear. After what seemed like an eternity, a voice broke the silence. It said, "Hello?" I responded, "Who's there?" The voice came closer. "Is anyone home?" I yelled. "Yeah, it's me." The voice stopped. I heard shuffling around and then the door closed. I let out a huge sigh of relief, thinking whoever it was had finally left. But then I heard the scratching sound again. The doorknob began to turn once more. I screamed. I don't know what I was screaming for. I guess I hoped that whoever it was would stop. But the door opened, and I saw a silhouette standing there in the darkness. It was the girl from before. She was standing there with her head down, her shoulders slumped. I asked her, "What do you want?" She didn't respond. She just stood there staring at me. I was frozen in place, unsure of what to do. Finally, she spoke. In a raspy, hollow voice, she said, "Where is he?" I responded, "Who?" She stepped out of the doorway into the room. I could see more of her face now. She had no eyelashes or eyebrows. It was as if they had been burned away. Her skin was pale white, almost translucent, as though you could see through it. I couldn't see any pupils either. Her eyes were just black holes staring back at me. She took another step forward and asked again, "Where is he?" I managed to stammer out, "Who are you?" She stopped and tilted her head to the side. Then she responded in a sickeningly sweet voice, "I'm here to take him home." That's when I noticed she wasn't alone. Behind her in the doorway stood dozens of other figures, all equally grotesque and terrifying. They were all staring at me with their soulless eyes. I screamed at the top of my lungs and tried to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. They started coming closer, their footsteps silent. One of them stepped forward and reached out a hand toward me. I screamed and tried to swat it away, but it grabbed hold of my shirt and pulled me closer. I kicked out my legs and landed a solid kick on his shin. He hissed at me in a voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Don't resist." The other creatures began to stir, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. I struggled against the creature holding me, but it was no use. He was too strong. I could feel my life draining away from me as he dragged me toward the door. Then suddenly a memory flashed before my eyes. My dad had told me once that if I ever saw a creature like that, I had to fight back. He told me to imagine that they were made of metal and try to rip them apart. So, with a last surge of adrenaline, I focused all my strength on ripping the creature in front of me apart. I scratched, I bit, I clawed, and finally I felt something give way. I ripped apart one of its arms. It screamed in agony as blood poured out of the wound. It dropped me to the floor and I scrambled away as fast as I could. The others were advancing on me, their eyes burning into my skull. I could hear their guttural screams echoing through the house. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling and falling, but getting back up again and running again. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from them. Finally, I burst out the front door and into the night. I ran and didn't stop running until I reached a neighbor's house. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. A woman opened it and I stumbled inside, collapsing on the floor in a heap. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed with my dad by my side. He looked haggard and exhausted. "Dad," I whispered, "what happened?" He pulled me into a tight hug. "You called us saying you needed help. I rushed over here as fast as I could, but your mom and the cops were already here. What happened, OP?" I explained everything to him about the creatures and the black-eyed girl. He listened patiently, his face grave. When I finished, he said, "OP, sometimes when we exert ourselves too much, our minds can play tricks on us. You probably imagined all of it." I knew he didn't believe me, and that hurt. I wish he had believed me. To this day, I still see the creatures sometimes in my nightmares, and I know that if I look hard enough, I will see the black-eyed girl waiting for me in the shadows. I haven't told anyone else this story, but I felt like I owed it to you guys to share my experience with you. Thank you for listening.